What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved rising stars walks onto a late-night stage with a secret so explosive it threatens to shatter everything we thought we knew about the biggest show on television? What happens when the cameras are rolling, the audience is laughing, and suddenly the room goes dead silent because a confession so shocking has just spilled out that nobody, not even the host himself, knows how to respond? That's exactly what went down when Joe Keery, the man who brought Steve Harrington to life in Stranger Things, sat across from Stephen Colbert on The Late Show and dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves rippling through every corner of the internet. This wasn't your typical promotional interview. This wasn't another celebrity showing up to crack jokes and plug their latest project. This was something entirely different. This was raw. This was real. And this was about to become one of the most talked about moments in late-night television history. Before we dive into the chaos that unfolded that night, make sure you hit that subscribe button for Prime Talk right now, because we bring you the most explosive, dramatic, and unfiltered celebrity stories that everyone else is too afraid to tell. Smash that like button, drop a comment below telling us what you think is about to go down, and buckle up because this story is going to take you on a ride you won't forget. The Late Show with Stephen Colbert is filmed in the historic Ed Sullivan Theatre in the heart of Manhattan, a place where legends have walked, where history has been made, where the Beatles once performed and changed music forever. On this particular evening, the energy in that theatre was electric. The audience had lined up for hours, some of them camping out overnight just for a chance to see their favorite stars up close. They came expecting laughs. They came expecting the usual Colbert charm, the witty political commentary, the playful banter with whatever celebrity happened to be promoting their latest film or television show. What they got instead was a front-row seat to television history. Joe Keery had been making the rounds. Stranger Things was wrapping up its final season, and the promotional machine was in full swing. He'd been on podcasts, radio shows, morning talk shows, always with that easygoing smile, that effortless charisma that made him a fan favorite. He'd talk about his character Steve's evolution from arrogant high school jock to beloved protector of a group of misfit kids. He'd joke about his famous hair, sign autographs, take selfies with fans. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Everything seemed like just another day in the life of a successful actor riding the wave of one of the most popular shows in streaming history. But those who knew Joe, really knew him, could sense something was different this time. There was a tension in his shoulders, a weight behind his eyes. The smile was still there, but it didn't quite reach the depths it usually did. His publicist had been more protective than usual, carefully vetting questions, making sure everything stayed on script. There were rumors swirling in the industry, whispers in the hallways of production studios, hushed conversations between executives who spoke in careful code. Something had happened behind the scenes of Stranger Things. Something big. Something that the public wasn't supposed to know about. And Joe Keery was carrying that secret like a boulder on his back. The Late Show taping began like any other. Colbert walked out to thunderous applause, his signature energy filling the room. He launched into his monologue, hitting all the beats, getting the laughs in all the right places. The audience was warm, receptive, exactly what a talk show host dreams of. When he announced that Joe Keery would be coming out after the commercial break, the cheers erupted. Stranger Things fans are loyal, passionate, almost cult-like in their devotion to the show and its cast. They couldn't wait to see Steve Harrington in the flesh. During the commercial break, backstage was a different story entirely. Joe sat in his chair, leg bouncing nervously, hands clasped together so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His publicist stood nearby, phone pressed to her ear, having what appeared to be an urgent conversation. A production assistant offered Joe water. He declined. Another offered to touch up his makeup. He waved them off. He was in his own world, mentally preparing himself for what he was about to do. Because Joe Keery had made a decision. He'd spent weeks, maybe months, wrestling with it. He'd lost sleep over it. He'd sought counsel from people he trusted. And he'd finally decided that tonight, live on national television, in front of millions of viewers, he was going to tell the truth. The whole truth. Consequences be damned. The commercial break ended. The band played him out. And Joe Keery walked onto that stage with the weight of the world on his shoulders and a secret burning a hole through his chest. Colbert greeted him warmly, as he always does with guests. They shook hands. Joe sat down. The audience applauded. Everything appeared normal. Colbert started with the easy questions, the softballs designed to warm up a guest and get them comfortable. How does it feel knowing Stranger Things is ending? What was your favorite moment from the final season? How are the fans reacting? Joe answered them all professionally, hitting his marks, giving the responses he'd rehearsed 100 times before. But there was something in his voice. A tremor. A hesitation. Colbert, a master interviewer with decades of experience reading people, noticed it immediately. His eyes narrowed slightly. His posture shifted almost imperceptibly. He sensed there was more beneath the surface. Then Colbert asked what seemed like an innocent question. A throwaway really. Something about what Joe would miss most about playing Steve Harrington. And that's when everything changed. Joe's face transformed. The practiced smile fell away. His eyes suddenly glistened with moisture. He took a breath, deep and shaky, the kind of breath someone takes when they're about to jump off a cliff and there's no going back. The audience, still riding the high of the previous laughter, began to quiet down, sensing the shift in energy. Colbert leaned forward slightly, his expression moving from jovial host to concerned friend in an instant. Joe opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. He looked down at his hands. He looked out at the audience. He looked at Colbert. And then, in a voice that was barely above a whisper but somehow carried through every speaker in that theater and into living rooms across America, he said something that nobody expected. He said, "Stephen, there's something I need to tell you. Something I need to tell everyone. And it's going to change everything you think you know about Stranger Things, about me, and about what really happened during our final season." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive theater. Colbert's eyes went wide. The audience collectively held their breath. Somewhere in the control room, a producer's hand hovered over a button, unsure whether to cut to commercial, unsure whether this was part of the planned segment or something else entirely. And in that moment, suspended in time, everyone watching knew they were about to witness something extraordinary. Something unrehearsed. Something real. Stephen Colbert has interviewed presidents, world leaders, Oscar winners, and some of the most powerful people on the planet. He's handled controversial topics with grace, navigated political minefields with wit, and maintained his composure through countless unexpected moments. But in this instant, even he seemed caught off guard. His hands, which had been gesturing animatedly just moments before, now rested flat on his desk. His famous quick wit, the razor-sharp comebacks that made him a late-night legend, seemed to have abandoned him entirely. He simply stared at Joe Keery, waiting, along with everyone else in that theater and everyone watching at home, for whatever was about to come next. Joe's publicist, watching from the wings, had gone pale. She took a step forward, as if she might rush onto the stage and pull him off, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the look of determination on Joe's face. Maybe it was the realization that whatever was happening was already in motion and couldn't be stopped. Maybe she knew, on some level, that Joe had every right to tell his truth, regardless of what contracts had been signed or what non-disclosure agreements had been put in place. She stood frozen, one hand covering her mouth, as the moment stretched out like taffy. The camera operators, professionals who'd filmed thousands of hours of television, instinctively tightened their shots. One zoomed in on Joe's face, capturing every micro-expression, every flicker of emotion. Another pulled back to get both Joe and Colbert in frame, documenting the reaction shot that would be replayed and analyzed millions of times in the hours and days to come. The lighting director, watching on monitors, made subtle adjustments, ensuring that every word, every gesture, would be captured in perfect clarity. Nobody in that building was breathing normally. Joe looked directly into the camera, breaking the fourth wall in a way that felt almost uncomfortably intimate. "I need you all to understand something," he began, his voice steadier now, gaining strength from some reservoir of courage deep within. "When you watch Stranger Things, when you see Steve Harrington sacrificing himself for his friends, putting himself in danger over and over again, becoming this protective big brother figure that everyone loves, you think you're watching great writing and good acting. And it is great writing. The Duffer Brothers are genuinely talented. But what you don't know, what nobody has been allowed to talk about, is how much of what you're seeing on screen isn't acting at all." Colbert's eyebrows raised. The audience leaned forward collectively, a wave of body language that rippled through the rows of seats. Someone coughed nervously. Someone else's phone buzzed and they frantically silenced it, terrified of missing a single word. Joe continued, and with each sentence, the story became more intense, more personal, more devastating. "During the filming of the final season, something happened on set that changed everything," Joe said, and now his voice began to crack with genuine emotion. "We were shooting one of the big action sequences, one of those scenes where the whole cast is together, fighting the monsters, trying to save Hawkins one last time. It was a night shoot. We'd been working for 16, 17 hours straight. Everyone was exhausted. The younger cast members, the kids who'd grown up on this show, they were running on fumes. And the production just kept pushing. Just one more take. Just one more angle. Just a few more hours. He paused, swallowing hard, and Colbert, sensing that Joe needed a moment, gently interjected. That sounds grueling. Film schedules can be incredibly demanding. His voice was soft, encouraging, giving Joe permission to continue at his own pace. But there was also concern there, genuine human concern for someone who was clearly in pain. Grueling doesn't even begin to cover it, Stephen, Joe replied, shaking his head. One of our cast members, one of the younger ones, they collapsed on set. Just completely gave out. The heat from the lights, the physical demands, the lack of sleep, it all caught up with them. And do you know what happened? They called the medic, sure. They made sure the kid was okay. But then, not even an hour later, they wanted to get back to filming. They wanted this teenager, who had just been treated for exhaustion and dehydration, to get back in costume and finish the scene because we were behind schedule and over budget. The audience gasped. It was an audible, collective intake of breath that filled the theater. Colbert's face darkened. Joe, that's unacceptable, he said, and there was steel in his voice now. It gets worse, Joe continued, and somehow, impossibly, the tension in the room ratcheted up even higher. I spoke up. I told them absolutely not. I told them this kid needed to go home, needed to rest, needed to be treated like a human being and not just a cog in their production machine. And you know what I was told? I was pulled aside by one of the producers and told, very clearly, that if I continued to make waves, if I continued to put the comfort of cast members over the needs of the production, they would find ways to minimize my role in the final season. They threatened to cut my scenes. They threatened to make Steve's ending less heroic, less meaningful. They weaponized the character that I've poured 7 years of my life into, and they used him as leverage to try to keep me quiet. The theater erupted, not in applause, but in shocked murmurs, angry exclamations, the kind of chaotic noise that happens when a crowd is processing something genuinely upsetting. Colbert held up his hand, trying to restore some order, but even he looked shaken. That is essentially blackmail, he said, naming it for what it was. Joe nodded, and there were tears streaming down his face now, real, raw emotion spilling out after being bottled up for far too long. I've had to smile through press tours knowing what happened. I've had to pretend everything was perfect behind the scenes while carrying this weight. And I'm tired, Stephen. I'm so tired of protecting an industry that doesn't protect the people who make it run. The confession hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. For a moment, Stephen Colbert sat in complete silence, his professional composure wrestling with visible emotion. His eyes had become glassy, reflecting the stage lights, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that transcended entertainment. Joe, what you're describing, this isn't just about one incident on one show. This is about an entire system that chews people up and spits them out, especially young people who don't have the power or the experience to fight back. He turned to the camera, addressing the audience at home with an intensity rarely seen on late-night television. And we, as consumers of this content, we need to understand that our favorite shows sometimes come at a human cost that nobody talks about. Joe wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a gesture so unpolished and genuine that it felt like watching someone's protective armor crack open in real time. That's exactly it, Stephen. That's exactly what I want people to understand. When I decided to come here tonight and tell this story, I knew there would be consequences. My agent told me not to do it. My lawyer told me I could be sued. My publicist practically begged me to reconsider. He gestured toward the wings where his publicist still stood, looking like she might faint at any moment. But I kept thinking about those kids. I kept thinking about how they trusted the adults around them to protect them, to look out for their well-being, and how that trust was violated over and over again in the name of production schedules and profit margins. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. These weren't fans anymore, not really. They were witnesses to something important, something that would ripple far beyond this theater, beyond this show, beyond even the Stranger Things franchise itself. A woman in the third row had tears streaming down her face. A man near the back sat with his arms crossed tightly, his jaw clenched in barely contained anger. This was hitting people in a visceral way because it confirmed something many had suspected but few had been willing to say out loud about the entertainment industry. Colbert leaned back in his chair, processing, and then asked the question that millions of viewers were screaming at their televisions. Have any of the other cast members spoken up about this? Are you alone in this, or do others share your concerns? It was a dangerous question, one that could potentially implicate others or put them in difficult positions, but it needed to be asked. Joe's expression shifted, became more guarded for just a moment. I can't speak for my castmates. That's not my place. What I can tell you is that I'm not the only one who saw what happened. I'm not the only one who was disturbed by it. But I also understand why others might not feel safe coming forward. The power dynamics in this industry are brutal. If you're a young actor, especially one who's been on a successful show, you're told constantly how replaceable you are, how lucky you should feel, how you should be grateful for the opportunity. That gratitude gets weaponized. It becomes a tool to extract more and more from people while giving them less and less protection. He was gaining momentum now, the initial nervousness replaced by something more powerful, righteous anger mixed with protective instinct. I've been in this business long enough now to have some perspective. I'm in my 30s. I have other opportunities. I can take this risk. But these kids, some of them are barely 18, 19 years old. Stranger Things is all they've known professionally. Their entire adolescence has been spent on that set. The idea of speaking out against the machine that made them famous, that pays their bills, that defines their public identity, it's terrifying. And the people running these productions know that. They count on it. Somewhere in the control room, the director was making frantic hand signals. They were going long, way over time, blowing past commercial breaks that advertisers had paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for. But nobody was calling cut. Nobody was pulling the plug. Even the network executives, watching the live feed from their offices, understood that this was bigger than advertising revenue. This was a moment that would define the show, possibly define the cultural conversation for weeks or months to come. Cutting away now would be journalistic malpractice. Colbert made a decision in that moment that showed exactly why he's more than just a comedian. He pivoted from interviewer to advocate. So what can be done? If what you're describing is happening on one of the biggest shows in the world, a show with massive resources and oversight, what does that say about smaller productions? What does that say about the thousands of young actors working on sets across this country and around the world right now who don't have your platform or your protection? Joe sat up straighter, energized by the question. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm risking everything to say this publicly. We need industry-wide reform. We need independent monitors on sets where minors are working. We need strict enforcement of labor laws that already exist but get ignored. We need to end the culture of silence, the non-disclosure agreements that prevent people from speaking about abuse and exploitation. We need unions with real teeth that will actually protect workers instead of just protecting the bottom line of productions. The audience began to applaud, tentatively at first, then building to something thunderous. People rose to their feet. It started in the back rows and cascaded forward like a wave until the entire theater was standing, clapping, some people shouting their support. Colbert stood too, applauding his own guest, an unusual move that spoke volumes about the significance of the moment. Joe looked overwhelmed, tears flowing freely now, not tears of sadness but of relief, of vindication, of finally being able to unburden himself of a secret that had been eating him alive. When the applause finally died down and everyone returned to their seats, Colbert asked one more question. What happens now? What happens when you walk off this stage? What happens tomorrow when this airs and the world starts weighing in? Joe took a deep breath and smiled, but it was a sad smile, the smile of someone who knows the road ahead will be difficult. Honestly, I don't know. I might never work in Hollywood again. Netflix might sue me into oblivion. Other actors might distance themselves from me because they're afraid of guilt by association. But you know what? I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. I'll be able to sleep at night knowing that I did the right thing, that I used whatever privilege and platform I have to try to protect people who can't protect themselves. And if that costs me my career, then so be it. Some things are more important than fame. The weight of those words settled over everyone like a blanket. In living rooms across America, people sat stunned. Parents thought about their own children, about what they would want someone to do if their kid was being exploited. Young actors watching felt a mixture of validation and fear, recognizing their own experiences in Joe's story. Industry professionals shifted uncomfortably, knowing they'd witnessed or participated in similar situations and done nothing. The moment Stephen Colbert and Joe Keery shook hands and the cameras finally cut away, the real chaos began. Backstage at the Late Show, Producers were already fielding calls from Netflix's legal team, from publicists representing the Stranger Things creators, from entertainment journalists smelling blood in the water. Joe's phone, which his publicist had wisely convinced him to leave in the dressing room, was vibrating so violently it had literally fallen off the table onto the floor. Text messages, missed calls, emails, all flooding in simultaneously from every corner of his professional and personal life. Some supportive, some furious, some panicked, all of them demanding answers, explanations, damage control. But Joe himself seemed strangely calm. As he walked off that stage, he looked lighter somehow, like a man who'd been carrying a crushing weight for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. He hugged Stephen, a real embrace, not the performative Hollywood kind. Colbert whispered something in his ear that the cameras didn't catch, but those standing close enough said it was simply, "You did the right thing. I'm proud of you." Coming from a man who'd spent decades in this industry, who understood exactly what Joe was risking, those words meant everything. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, every social media platform was drowning in reactions. The hashtag #JusticeForJoe was trending #1 worldwide within 30 minutes of the show ending. But it wasn't just fans weighing in. Other actors, some famous, some struggling, some who'd left the industry entirely, began sharing their own stories. A former child star from a different Netflix show posted a tearful video talking about similar experiences with grueling schedules and producer intimidation. A veteran character actor tweeted, "Joe Keery just said what thousands of us have been too scared to say for decades. The system is broken and it's breaking people." A prominent director, someone with actual power in Hollywood, posted a lengthy statement calling for industry-wide investigations into working conditions on streaming platform productions. The response wasn't universally positive, of course. Industry defenders came out swinging. Anonymous sources, almost certainly studio representatives, started planting stories in entertainment trades suggesting Joe was exaggerating, that he was a disgruntled actor upset about his character's arc, that this was a publicity stunt. Conservative media outlets, always eager to attack Hollywood, weaponized the story for their own purposes, twisting Joe's legitimate critique of labor practices into culture war ammunition. Some fans, particularly those who'd built their entire identities around loving Stranger Things, couldn't reconcile the darkness behind the scenes with their attachment to the show and lashed out at Joe for ruining something they loved. But the overwhelming tide of public opinion was on his side. Parents across the country watched that interview and saw their own children in those young Stranger Things actors. Labor advocates saw an opportunity to push for real reform in an industry that had operated with impunity for too long. Lawyers specializing in entertainment law began reaching out, offering to represent Joe pro bono if Netflix followed through on legal threats. A prominent senator announced plans to hold hearings on working conditions in the entertainment industry, specifically focusing on protections for minor actors. The story had transcended entertainment news and become a genuine cultural moment. In the days that followed, the fallout was seismic. 3 producers from Stranger Things were quietly removed from their positions, though Netflix's official statement claimed it was due to creative differences and the natural conclusion of the series. The Directors Guild and Screen Actors Guild issued joint statements announcing new protocols for productions involving minors. Several young actors from the show posted cryptic messages of support for Joe, careful not to violate their own NDAs but making it clear they stood with him. One simply posted a photo of the entire cast with a heart emoji over Joe's face. Another shared the number for an entertainment industry workers' crisis hotline. Joe himself largely disappeared from social media after that night. His last post was simple, a photo of him looking directly at the camera with a caption that read, "Thank you for hearing me. Thank you for believing survivors and workers. This isn't about me. This is about changing a system that's hurt too many people for too long. Keep pushing for better. Keep demanding accountability. Don't let them wait this out and go back to business as usual." Television critics called it the most important late-night moment since Jon Stewart's post-9/11 return. Cultural commentators compared it to other watershed moments when celebrities used their platforms to expose industry wrongdoing. Film schools began using the clip in classes about ethics in production. Labor organizers cited it in campaigns for better working conditions across all industries, not just entertainment. Joe Keery had walked onto that stage as an actor promoting a television show and walked off as an accidental activist, a whistleblower, a symbol of speaking truth to power even when it costs you everything. Now it's your turn to weigh in. What do you think about what Joe Keery revealed? Do you believe the entertainment industry needs massive reform? Have you or someone you know experienced similar exploitation in your workplace? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because this conversation is just getting started and your voice matters. The only way real change happens is when enough people refuse to stay silent, when enough of us demand better for workers, for young people, for everyone who makes the content we love. And if you want more stories like this, more unflinching looks at what really happens behind the scenes in Hollywood, more explosive revelations that the mainstream media is too scared to cover, then you absolutely need to subscribe to Prime Talk right now. We're not here to give you sanitized press releases and carefully managed narratives. We're here to tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's messy, even when powerful people don't want you to know it. Hit that subscribe button. Smash that like. Share this video with everyone you know who cares about justice, accountability, and protecting the vulnerable from exploitation. This is Prime Talk, and we're just getting started.